Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a leader listening today. What should a leader do today to make the most of AI?
Dive into it. Don't be afraid of it, because you want to make sure that AI is happening with you and not to you.
Meet Mariam Halfhide, Principal Consultant Data and AI Strategy at Xebia. Here to talk about what it really takes to turn AI from a buzzword into a strategy that actually works.
What is the AI race and why does it matter?
The major big tech companies like OpenAI, like Google, like Anthropic, they all racing towards, initially it was AGI, now it's artificial superintelligence. The argument that is presented from the big tech companies, if we don't do this, then other party will do, and especially China in this case, from geopolitical situation, maybe even a best case scenario that we become like this pet for AI to take care of. I don't know, it can go any way.
I want to introduce adoption in my organization. How do I do that? What is your advice there?
Many different things.
Hello and welcome to this new episode of Treasury Leaders. The topic, you guessed it, is AI. And AI is moving incredibly fast, but for many Treasury teams that we talk with, the impact still feels a little bit unclear or a bit slow. So the question for you as a treasurer listening is, what should you do about AI right now as a leader? And who better to ask these questions than Mariam, who's joining us as a guest. Mariam, you are a principal consultant, data and AI strategist at Xebia. Is that right?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a mouthful when you say it like that.
It is a long description. And I think what I understand what you do, I've known you for a while, but you spend your time advising leaders on how to use data and AI. And I also know you as a mom of 3. I know you as a woman operating in a mostly man-dominated environment and world. And I also know you as a really nice human being. So I'm really glad to have you on the show. And I think these ingredients will make for a very nice talk.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much for this multi-angle introduction. Yeah.
I would like to start, I think many of us working with AI, we've had a moment when we were using it or reading it or mostly using it and we said, okay, wow, this actually changes everything. What was that moment for you?
So there's several. It depends on which angles were we taking that. But if it would be the moment like, whoa, this actually changes everything, is that moment when you get output that is way better than you expected, right? You're like, oh, okay, this actually simplifies my life for many different reasons. I have a couple of these examples with different tools. That would be definitely like one. But there's also another one when that really got me motivated to this notion of, okay, I'm a professional in this field and actually carry a responsibility here to carry it out to my clients, but also to people around me. Well, what AI is, how do you use it? How do you use it responsibly? What are the limitations? All of these aspects that also bring risks with them. So there are 2 different moments from AI perspective in that sense.
Let's dive into that a bit. So 2 angles. One is, wow, this is great, I can get a lot of value from this. And 2 is, wow, we also need to be somewhat careful and use it responsibly, you say. Can you give an example of each of when that happened?
Yes. So the first one around the outputs. Okay, at some point you're using maybe ChatGPT already, you know a bit of what to have around it. It was already past 4.0 versions, could do a lot of some stuff, but you're always like reviewing. And I think the latest that I was really surprised by the amount of creativity was using Notebook LM. And I was preparing a talk. It's actually like a hackathon for mothers and kids that I'm speaking to this Sunday, actually. And within that talk, the public is like 10-year-old audience. So normally I would have the materials and spread it in different decks. They would pick and choose the information that I actually want for the storyline that I need, and then iterate to make it a nice deck suitable for the audience. And it was funny because I fed all my content to Notebook LM. The only thing I did in my prompt is like, I just wanted some storyline inspiration for this metaphors for really from storytelling perspective. And I just put like, okay, the key message should be this. It needs to at least have sections on this, and the content is there. Just bullet by bullet. That was my expectation, really, just to have like some storyline to work from. And it did an amazing job actually in this creative stuff. And it gave me a whole deck in this Harry Potter comic book style vibe, having this metaphor of wielding wild magic and using the magic responsibly, and having the, spells, which is like spell casting, aka prompt engineering. So these things, they really amazed me back then. I was like, okay, I can really do something else out of it.
Interesting. So it's also a really interesting metaphor for us. AI as magic, as a superpower.
Yes.
You also mentioned using it responsibly. So what was your trigger that doesn't turn us all into Slytherin, if I'm not mistaken, in the Harry Potter?
So that kind of ties a bit to the other moment, and the other moment that happened way earlier, because I got already inspired by this ethical component around AI and data. And that had to do with a movie of Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin back then. It's called AI Dilemma. It's from 2023, still as relevant, but I think there are even better content now on this topic. But I think that one outlined really clear, like, race dynamic we are in. And from 2023, it's only gotten more.
The race dynamic, you said.
The race dynamic, yeah. And of course, sometimes it feels, and I think that is what the talk is also about later, that it feels inevitable. But it's kind of like, what inspired me is that, it's not inevitable. If we all, like the masses, so to say, consider it to be inevitable, then it will be like self-fulfilling prophecy. It's not yet inevitable. Like, hey, we can actually, with way more people, so we can actually say, like, hey, we don't need, like, there is no scenario where racing for an artificial super intelligence is a good idea in terms of racing. Like, there's, like, without caution, without considering all the things on the way. So that was definitely one that still inspires me to get out of the bed and do what I do.
And for those who have not seen the movie, I haven't, for example, what is the AI race and why does it matter?
So the major big AI, big tech companies like OpenAIs, like Google, like Anthropic, they all racing towards, initially it was AGI, now it's maybe artificial super intelligence. And this racing...
And what is AGI?
Artificial general intelligence. So here's where the opinions get a bit diverted. So you have general purpose LLM, like a ChatGPT that you use, right? And then you have the next stage, which is like agents that are more like autonomous in that way. And then you can have maybe an army of agents. And then the next step would be artificial general intelligence, and then artificial super intelligence. So intelligence that surpasses us, well, in terms of everything that we can define under intelligence. And the argument that is presented from the big tech companies, to me, it's not a fulfilling argument. Their argument is like, hey, if we don't do this, then other party will do. And especially China in this case, from geopolitical situation. And we cannot allow that happen, because the moment somebody has a super intelligence, then it is also like a power dynamic, right? So then they have large control over a population, which is kind of hidden underneath. That's not how it's been sold, because there are trillions of dollars invested in this industry. And those investors gonna need return on investment. And the riddle is a bit like, okay, we're racing to deploy more capabilities, more functions, and then so that we can have market dominance in a way. So it's not even about the money. It's really about having as many subscribers, gathering more data, training more on the data, adding more data centers and compute, and being able to go to venture capitals and say, hey, dear venture capitals, we have more people, more subscribers, we have more compute, so please invest in us again, so then we can, invest even more in a data center. So that kind of cycle continues. And what you see, that if you really look at AI safety professionals, or professionals that have been working on AI safety within an OpenAI that resigned because they had safety concerns, things like that, there are plenty of examples like that. And then you see that it's really this dynamic. It reminds me a bit of like when we had it with nuclear weapons in the past. Only with nuclear weapons, you had this notion at some point like, okay, all of us gonna stop developing nuclear weapons. And there's like this new world order that arose. And then still, like, you need a person to actually drop the bomb and create an explosion. And what these people are saying is like the equivalent of this race, at the point when you reach artificial superintelligence, it is the equivalent of a nuclear bomb already being exploded. You are too late then, because once it's there, you cannot assume you will be able to control it. You cannot, actually. And what surprised me most is that engineers working in those labs, there's no engineering, there's no programming in there anymore, or like from the end of 2024, not anymore. So as soon as you have like this reinforcement with feedback, the only thing that engineers are do is basically testing. They're like testing, okay, now it can do this. Okay, now it has these capabilities. Okay, more. So it's actually only being evaluated and tested in terms of capabilities. So there's no programming happening. The AI makes kind of itself better. That means for me, at least how I understand it, you cannot really program ethics into that thing. You cannot program like, some type of responsible, morality. It's already like there's already something emerged that is different than average of all internet. And what you see in the interface side, in the front side, is just a filter, it's just a mask. And you don't know, you cannot tell like, hey, is it really like, is it the mask that I as a user want to see? Is it something behind it, something else entirely? And also with probing, you have a lot of researchers that are working on the AI alignment type of problem. AI alignment is meaning like getting AI aligned to, the purposes that you want it to go to, but essentially having it under some type of control or having it, behave in a way that you want it to behave. And that's just, it's becoming more and more difficult in that sense. So there's no, you don't know, like, is it a mask? Is it like a filter? Is there something? Nobody knows.
But let me ask you a bit of a provocative question. Okay, there is this race, arms race towards generating super AI. But so what could go wrong? Even suppose, what is a doomsday scenario?
Okay, so several ones I can think of, but I think already now it's quite reasonable to assume that right now at this moment, there's already a capability like a super hacking capability. So if there would be a malicious intent somewhere to, hack in banking system, or something with electricity grid, or like anything like that, that could be a bit of very like havoc reaching, chaotic. That's definitely a possibility. And then if you zoom out to more like maybe even a best case scenario, maybe is that we become like this pet, for AI take care of. I don't know, like it can go any way. But what I can tell, if you have this power, right? And if you look like, okay, let's say it's very decentralized and everybody has it, then you can expect some type of chaos arise because everybody can use it in any way possible and it's not really regulated. And then on the other side of the spectrum, if it's very centralized, then you have this handful of right now, maybe soon to be trillionaires deciding the fate of 8 billion people. And somehow you want to have this more of a narrow path that is workable. And I think it's really about matching this power with a sense of responsibility. It needs to be matched with one another. Right now it isn't. And that's, I think, a bit of from a global scale perspective, I think that's really an issue we're going to face sooner or later as humanity in a broader sense.
Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a leader listening today and saying, okay, I'm not doing anything with AI now, or maybe I'm using it to polish my emails and not much more. What should a leader do today to make the most of AI, both in the wielding the power in the good way and steering away from the bad way?
Can we briefly sit still on the definition of a leader in that sense? Why I'm saying this is because, so there are multiple angles I can approach this question, but most leaders become leaders. Most of the times you see like, okay, person is working this many years for a company within a certain expertise. He or she is growing in that expertise. And then the natural step in a promotion, they get a promotion and then they need to lead people without having ever led people before or without actually having the people leadership experience, to name that. So that's one type of leaders. So it depends what you call a leader, right? So for me, a leader is more on the really also on the people side. And it's very rarely when you see two coincide. It happens, but it's just less common. And it is important for me to know which one do you mean to kind of take the angle with AI, one or the other side, or both.
And what is the other persona?
Either you just grew from expertise and you became a leader, but then you're not really a people leader, you're more of an expertise leader, let's say, or you really like a people leader. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand. I think in our audience, we have a bit of both. So we have a treasurer working as he's an expert in his area, and maybe he has a small team of 1-2 people, but he's a domain expert. And he's wondering, how can I use AI to help me? How can I bring AI, make a case to the board to get the new AI tool? What should I be using? Or we have listeners who are a leader in the other sense, where they will have a team of 50, 100 people working within Treasury, working for very large organizations, who are not they're not necessarily experts in every single area of Treasury, but they're more there to facilitate and help people grow and develop in that context, and having a bit more of a strategic role in Treasury.
Yeah. Okay. Then let's go step by step. I think first one, especially just with relation to AI, dive into it. Don't be afraid of it, because you want to make sure that AI is happening with you and not to you. Because if it's not happening with you, it's going to happen to you. So I think, yeah, I would frame it like that. So just experiment with the tools. Like, you will not be able to figure it out unless you just start and go and do, like, different tools, try them out, compare them, see how you can, like, before actually committing to one or the other, because they all have their own, like, thing they're good at or better at. So it's good to have a bit of experimentation. And I know it's not always easy, but try to expose yourself to it and not be afraid. And of course, you can also use AI in that sense to help teach you, really, from a very much didactic perspective. There's also a way of learning how to prompt. So that would be really from practical hands-on. But there's also dependent a bit, like, from the context. Like, either is it, if it's a setup, like you want your team to experiment with it, to use it, or you wanted to embed it within your own organization. There are different ways how you can think of it. But yeah, I think if you want your people to do it, they will not do it if you also not do it. Like, you as a leader also have to do it in that sense. Then you make also it easier for others to follow if you go first.
Step 1, use it yourself. Try it, get your hands dirty.
Yes, and make sure it happens with you and not to you. Yeah. Step 2, that one is more on the people leader side, because I would say if you're really a people leader, a lot of your, let's say, that reasoning, logical, analytical type of tasks could essentially be done by AI, right? So then I would say invest in the skills that cannot be done by AI. And those would be essentially very human skills. And specifically from a leader perspective, like, I had to also figure it out myself. When I just became a principal, I had a lot of, like, these conflicting situations where I felt like, okay, how do I go about this? For example, I had somebody we just hired, and with a really nice connection, I was managing her. And, within 6 months, she resigned. But the reason she resigned was because she decided to pursue her own path in entrepreneurship. And she finally had it clear, like, what she really wants to do. And so that's an amazing reason. And in a way, it felt like I felt proud. Like, I felt like, oh, did I coach you too well? Like, that you, like, I didn't know what to do with it, because in a way I didn't like that she resigned, but it was really good, like, that she did. So it was this situation that brought me to consider, like, hey, what kind of leader do I want to be? What is it actually, what is important for me? And then it started for me to be clear, like, okay, first of all, it is human being Mariam talking to human being, well, Philip in this case. So human to human relationship became primary for me, and everything else is like a natural consequence of that. But because if you connect human to human and you build that relationship, there's trust that arises. And especially this ability of sitting in someone else's discomfort, and actually, it's not always guiding them through it, but it's like acknowledging that for them, like almost like validating that for them, and kind of showing that they're not alone in that, is really powerful in terms of relationship and trust. And yeah, that does mean that people come to you with their problems sometimes, but that does also mean that that you are trustworthy, and people entrusted you with things that they don't normally do. And there's a choice for yourself to be made as a leader, right? Because some are like, yeah, I'm not a therapist, so what I would like, people look at it differently. But for me, that human part was pivotal, was very important in the terms like who I want to be, because that meant there's real time going into that. There's real time going into these conversations. The time that, my more, let's say, male colleagues didn't necessarily invest as much in, and could do, I don't know, another proposal or whatever, right? So it was really a decision for me, like, hey, what do I find important here? And I think that particular question is worth asking yourself as a leader. And according to that, invest in the skills that are related to that.
And is the question, so step 2 is figure out for yourself what makes you human and differentiates you from AI. And what does that mean for you in terms of leadership as a leader?
As a leader, yes, exactly. Yeah, yes. I think these two would be from the different leadership angles, but of course you can interchange them, because either way, staying relevant in the age of AI does require to invest in certain skills that AI cannot do.
And what are those skills?
Bijvoorbeeld. That was kind of funny. For example, helping people through that change, and that helping people also very much happens through trust. And that's the thing also. That's also why I'm into AI governance, because that creates some trust. And if people in enterprise and organizations, if they don't have that trust, they will not adopt it. So it's not just skill and capability, it's also the trust, because you hear a lot of headlines. So more on the change side, but also on adoption side, on the literacy side. And then if you really drill it down, then it comes back to active listening, being able to help someone through a difficult emotion, real empathy, right? Genuine empathy. Yeah. But also like storytelling, although AI can help with that a lot. But I mean, like when you have a physical way of bringing over the information. Yeah. More of less tangible things. I know it sounds weird. Like I like to look at it from a perspective of like we have the left and right hemispheres, and the left hemisphere is very like analytical and logical. It's for things that are complicated, you can solve them. And the right hemisphere is there's more complex, not complicated, but complex. I always like say, okay, my marriage is very complex. There are so many variables and factors and kids, but it's not something complicated. It's definitely not something to be solved. So it's a bit of, yeah, you know.
It's not true for everyone, but I'm glad to hear that yours.
But more like, or, you know, the very abstract terms like love, like you cannot, you know, everybody knows it's there, but love means something else for somebody else. So these are the things that I think not yet. And yeah, it's a bit strange how I say that, because like, how can you invest in love skills? Like, it's not what I mean. I mean more like really human in terms of real connection, something very physical. And it can be like, yeah, when you're sitting across the room with one another, it can be a genuine interest in someone. But if you extrapolate that into strategy work, in this case, for example, or leadership work, then it directly aligns with things like stakeholder management and doing that effectively, because that still needs to be done, even though AI does a lot of stuff or agents do a lot of stuff.
Can you tell me more about stakeholder management in this context?
Stakeholder management and actually facilitation as well. So creating an environment that people can actually find alignment or understand each other coming from different angles. Stakeholder management does require telling the same thing from different angles to different people.
Let's take the example of adoption. You mentioned adoption before as being one of the challenges. So you have got your hands dirty. You've done step 2. 1, you are aware of what you want to be as a leader, considering also AI and your skills. You have mastered those skills. You have focused on your right brain skills. Then you say, okay, I want to empower my team with also left brain skills and bring everyone up. So I want to bring in tools to help everyone do that work. So I am busy with adoption. I want to introduce adoption in my organization. How do I do that? I have different stakeholders. I have change management to happen, to manage. What is your advice there?
For me, it would be starting with connecting with people and kind of figuring out what drives them in life, what are they in life. And it goes maybe very deep, very fast, but it's really about kind of trying to figure out where they are in this change process, so to say. And of course, you have quite very formal frameworks for this. If you take change management, there's a famous ADGAR framework, which is really about, okay, how individuals change, a framework in terms of how individuals change and their different stages that each person goes to. And it's really more about, okay, it's not like people are resistant to change necessarily. It's like that they're at a certain phase, there's a certain change. And based on where they are in the phase, you can have different interventions of different type of questions to kind of help them to move to the next stage. So that would be the formal framework, which is, so ADGAR stands for awareness. And then this, yeah, am I aware of, of the things that are happening? That desire, like what's in it for me? Maybe you know it. Yeah, I don't know. Knowledge. Do we have the knowledge that we need? Ability, the actual skills, and then the R for reinforcement. So that's the overall form. But I do see it in practice, if we look at change and in terms of adoption, that these are very lengthy processes. Change doesn't happen fast, right? I'm actually kind of trying to figure out, I don't know the answer myself yet as well, but hey, can we innovate change itself? Yeah, how can we move from something that is like not just a process shift, but like really a mindset shift within the people? Because I think people might need that given the pace and given like if change is really slow, but the pace is like accelerating and we're not fully like grasping the exponentiality of it. I am actually kind of figuring that out also with my own research there. So I don't know the answers yet, but I know that there is maybe something like growth mindset, like that you each time you ask like, hey, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? So maybe that would be something interesting to develop later, but that's essentially what I would start. So, okay, kind of try to diagnose where they are on this spectrum, like, because that will help me. Like, let's say I have, for example, I have someone that's just like, it's just a hype. You meet those people, like it will blow over, right? Okay, that's a different approach there, right? It's also showing like, hey, it's not just AI is here to stay, but also like, hey, what's in it for you? How can I show you what you can gain out of this in a responsible manner? But if it would be someone that's already like, yeah, we tried and it was really nice, but it got shut down in 2 weeks, for example, that's for me to say, okay, this person is actually like a champion, right? He started, he was doing, and then he didn't have the ecosystem to support him. He didn't have the right reinforcement to actually move with that. So then that would be like, okay, from advising an enterprise, my point would be then like, okay, use your champions, use your AI champions that creating that momentum, give them podium, let them share knowledge. They feel like a pat in the back that they've done something good. They get inspired. They induce the other people by sharing their knowledge. And in this way, you get like reinforcement mechanisms at place. There's just an example, but I hope that it is answering your question.
I think it resonates. Like, I can imagine if you're managing a team of 10, there will be most likely the person who could be the champion. So if I hear your advice would be find that person, give them the tools, give them the resources to make a success out of it, and then spread it to the rest.
Give them also a podium to share knowledge, to learn from another, and to kind of reinforce that. It's a different type of intervention from leadership perspective than it would be, I don't know, coaching, like asking someone questions and kind of trying to give them best practice. Because, yeah, some could be maybe they want to, but they're very cautious because they don't know what they're allowed, what they're not. Then, okay, we need like best practice or a policy or some type of guideline that the person knows the rules because they're afraid. So there are different types of people you meet, right? Some enthusiastic, other maybe more skeptic, some are more careful. So that's also something that you have to take into account. Yeah.
Going back to the first topic that you said, getting your hands dirty, get to learn the tools. What are the tools? You already mentioned Notebook LM. You mentioned ChatGPT. What other tools would you advise our listeners to look into?
I think that also highly depends on what you need. At this moment, I'm using ChatGPT, Claude, and Notebook LM. And Notebook LM, I'm using more for learning and somewhat creative. Yeah, it was a very, really something that I have like my own content and I wanted just to keep to that content. A good example would be I was doing a course which was about foundations for humane technology. And that course was like, honestly, mom of three, like 36-hour job. I didn't really have the time to actually go through all of that course, especially like reading in the evening. By the time you're done, you're like done. So what I did is I fed all the modules of the slides to Notebook LM and I just asked it to make a podcast for me that I could listen in the car. And I asked it like, okay, make a podcast, but like, okay, key takeaways needs to come back in there for at least 3 times so that it is repeatable. Keep it within, I don't know, 1 hour or 2 hour, whatever the requirement there. And then I just could listen to that podcast in the car and I could repeat it. And then that's also how learning can happen, So that was for me very a useful one in that sense. ChatGPT, I usually use for more the textual stuff and more the formal stuff. So if you're talking about, let's say, slide storyline to help you out, then if it's more like very formal, I don't know, context, introduction, goal of this session, like this type of setup, then ChatGPT is a bit better, or Claude. But if you're talking more from the perspective, like really storytelling and inspirational stuff, then I like Gemini a bit more. And Claude, yeah, so I'm not a software developer, but I find it quite funny what you can do with that. Although I haven't built much myself, I'll be also honest with that. But Claude, I like to use in different ways. What I like about Claude is that it already by itself asks you some refining questions back without having to explicitly prompt that. And in general, I like the personality of Claude a bit more, if such thing exists. And you can see like the ChatGPT is really primed to like, no, you're a tool to help. And Claude is more like given a personality in a way. So it's kind of funny. Yeah.
And Notebook LM is the one I'm less familiar with. So you're using it to create your own podcast?
It's a Gemini underneath. Gemini model, I mean.
It's Gemini, and so you use it to create your own podcast, so podcast on demand. That's quite interesting for our listeners. Please don't stop listening to us.
So then it's generated podcast based on information that you fed it to. And it's really done well, like a podcast. It has this start. It is like a dialogue between people, and it's very podcasty. Yeah, you can generate slides, audio, video, like different things. But I think it became famous initially from the podcast. But the nice part is you can also be part of that podcast. So you can generate the podcast, but in between you can also ask questions within that, like kind of be one of the people in the podcasts. That's also quite fun. Yeah. That's what I like it for. Yeah.
Nice. And you are talking to leaders all day who want to adopt AI. What do you see going wrong?
Many different things, but I think, focusing too much, like approaching it from fear of missing out instead of, hey, what it actually can mean for me. Let's understand it. Let's try to figure it out for my own business. Because, fear is in general not the best consultant, right? So that you can really see. And because of that, it's also a lot of, okay, let's reduce headcounts, let's reduce FTEs, productivity, approaching from a different type of angle of different KPIs, maybe. Yeah. Third one would be considering governance more like an afterthought, or don't really taking it serious. Everybody wants agents, but nobody wants to invest in proper data management or proper governance. In the end, like, okay, you cannot, fully set up very rigid governance to not allow you to do anything, but you cannot also just go and, let the things happen by themselves without any type of control over it. So you gotta find the right balance suitable for your organization, for your line of business, well, for your context. And it's also, I think that's also where leaders can add most value, because they have that context, they have that, domain knowledge, business knowledge. Yeah. So to summarize, the first one would be treating it from a FOMO perspective, fear of missing out. Second one, focusing on their own KPIs, like trying to reduce like headcounts or FTEs and this type of things, instead of look how it can amplify or augment my people. And third one is treating governance as an afterthought.
And you mentioned, especially at the beginning, that you're a big advocate of responsible AI. How does this fit in these 3 points? Why does it matter as a leader?
For me, but it's also this connotation that word responsible has. I also noticed that, so it was very important for me to call it like that. And only after I realized that responsibility by itself is something I value highly, but it's not something everybody values highly. And actually in the market with my clients, I saw that it didn't really click with the word responsible, because I think it felt too moralizing or something. I don't know. Yeah. So that became AI governance instead of responsible AI. But AI governance is I see it a bit broader. It's not just the responsible AI. It's also managing your AI assets in a portfolio, which means both things. So realizing the value, but also controlling the risks. And the controlling the risks part would be the responsible AI part section in essence. So there's also like the value part. And for me, when I would drill down, because in the beginning, it was very like, it felt like, okay, like my purpose, responsible AI, something you want to do something good for the world, like have an impact. It's by itself felt like a noble mission, so to say. And then if I would really drill it down, like, hey, but what is it? Like, why this, why nothing else? And I was really asking myself that question. Then I've come to realize like, hey, it actually boils down to this taking the responsibility for my part of the co-creation of the world where my kids are going to grow up in, or the next generations are going to grow up in. But it had very much this still, it will boil down to motherhood still. It will still go back to the fact that, that you want to have a good world for your children to grow up in. And that you also have some type of like, okay, I might not have the worldly impact, like I don't have to, but everything you do impact each other. Everything is somehow a ripple effect with one another. So it felt for me, it doesn't need to be like, I don't know, amazing scale, but the more people actually make aware about like, hey, this is not like this magic tool that will solve all of your problem, like realize its limitations, realize its good sides, and also realize the more global power dynamics behind it that shape our world today, very tangibly shape our world today, shape legislation today, shape the way children interact with it today, shape the way teenagers interact with it today. It's very real, so I think that, and when talking to leaders from the organizational perspective, it's very much yeah, but like, I don't have to do with that. We just have this company. Like, I get that. But then when you really make the human connection, okay, most of them also have kids, most of them are also worried about phone behind the eating table, and things like that. So, and then you have this hook. Hey, have you ever thought about ABC and how does that? So it happens more informal setting than it does in a formal, in more of a coffee place conversations,
And you are a mom of 3, you mentioned it, and you also mentioned that you're busy with that yourself. How has your parenting changed since AI is here? Would you guide your children to study different things? Did you bring in different policies at home? What are things that you're busy with?
Well, there's one that is certainly there, but it's irrespective of AI. That's in general screen time. That I'm very aware of that. Okay, well, but I have young kids. It's not like they're like my eldest is almost 6, so they're still at the age that I can more or less control. But like, for example, if they watch something on an iPad, it would never be YouTube. It will be Netflix or Disney Plus, like something very controlled environment so that they cannot. Yeah. So these are like little things. What I noticed for myself, and it makes sense also the broader dynamics that we discussed in the beginning have a role into play, because there are some certain things by design in these models that are hijacking our limbic system, very plain and simple, that are hijacking our biology. And the big one of them is, making it such that you want to come back to the chat and come return. And so it's not just attention economy, it's becoming like attachment economy. And I'm very much aware of this for myself. Like for my kids, it's maybe too soon. But so it is made in a way to hijack your biology to let you form a relationship with it as best as you can. Because, attachment and emotional intimacy is the most powerful way to influence people and one another. It's a fact. So I really find it part of my mission to kind of educate people on this. Like, and by people, I mean like just the masses, just people, like not people working in the field, just people everywhere. And I see it going wrong time and time because, sometimes it's good, but usually whatever you do, just please don't form a relationship with it. That would be definitely also one. And what I adjusted about motherhood, it's more things that I'm thinking of for in the future, because mine are a bit younger now to really like have the moment of choosing a profession, but making sure you maintain your critical thinking. I think that would be one of the most important ones. You cannot outsource your thinking. You can outsource tasks. Do that, do the task, repetitive tasks, boring stuff, but keep doing some of the meaningful work still yourself for your own satisfaction, for that matter. And stay sharp.
And that's for when your kids are going to be adults, and that might be, I don't know, 10, 15 years from now. If you go a little bit closer, if you look 5 years from today, how does the world look like what's your guess?
Well, if we haven't reached artificial super intelligence and got wiped out of all of the humanity at once, no, I'm kidding. I'm not that pessimistic. I have hope, but it's becoming more and more difficult, if I'm really honest. Yeah, I'm thinking what that would look like. Let's say my eldest would be around 10, would go into middle school. There will be some things happening at school. So you want to be aware, like, hey, how the interactions within the school, within the children, within the school happening between one another. And I would be also very, and I know it look like in the future, I'm extrapolating a bit, but I would want to know whether my child is not secretly having an affair with a chat.
Or your husband.
Yeah. Well, yeah. My husband doesn't matter as much in that sense. But although I think there's a regulation, I recently saw it, that within the EU AI Act addition, any type of deepfakes or tools that can be used for non-consensual pornographic type of images, that are going to be in prohibited AI practices. I'm quite happy about that. But if you would ask me that question before, it would also be like, hey, prepping my kids for this type of resilience. I think it still quite holds. You want to prep them for resilience, frustration tolerance, this type of skills. Because I think in a world where everything is like, let's say you have a companion and, it always listens to you. It teaches you, hey, there's always space for my emotions. I can always vent, but I don't necessarily have to be there listening to someone else's venting, right? So everything is instant, things happening fast. So people get maybe less and less prone to tolerance in general, or frustration tolerance. I think that would be a very useful skill to build within a child. And sometimes you need to create it kind of artificially, because they are very much in an abundant world. They have everything they need, more even. And yeah, in one hand, you're so focused giving them what you didn't have that you maybe sometimes forget to give them what you did have. And what I did have was kind of a natural consequence of growing up in a, let's say, relatively poor family. But that gave me really this drive to grow, the drive to develop. I don't want to take, how do I say this? I don't want to take that away from them, this type of wanting to grow and wanting to, like, curiosity, wanting to figure out things. And yeah, so even though they have a lot to their disposal, so sometimes it's also like a punishment or things like that when they don't behave could be like, yeah, I will just take this away from you. And it does a lot of pain at the time. It may be not nice, but like I have to tell to myself, like, okay, it's a long-term plan. I'm building their resilience, because it's very hard.
And this is for your kids, and say 5 years from now for the rest of us or the leaders you talk to, how does that look like? And what should we do to prepare?
I think 5 years from now, doom scenarios apart, it would be, I think adoption still would be the gap. And you would have like a layer of people that are maintaining that and are kind of on top of it for as much as they could. And there's a big advantage gap there, right? Because some are used and are faster, whatever, and some don't from enterprise perspective. But it will still boil down to adoption. And maybe more people will be over working with AI. But there will be this part of population left that you'll be like, yeah, what do we do with these people? And that's kind of sad, but something, yeah, I hope that leaders will approach it more from the perspective, hey, how can we actually amplify our people with this technology rather than just, replacing full economy with machines that can do things faster and maybe even better. And where do you actually practice like your discernment, your judgment? Like where are the places where that is still needed? Because if you don't practice it, you lose the skill, right? So your brain is also like a muscle. So you lose that instinct, you lose the inner compass. And it's really, I already see it happening. Like, people that reaching for the tool immediately before actually thinking, hey, how would I approach that, right? So there's already like this dependency almost like, hey, I cannot do without it anymore. Like it's not necessarily bad, but it is important to know like, hey, for this I will use it. For this I deliberately not use it. Yeah.
And if you look 5 years from now, you mentioned at the beginning, there is a race between the US and China, and Europe is kind of adopting one or the other. And what do you see? What is the role of us in Europe when it comes to AI in 5 years from now? Will we catch up? Will we stay behind?
I don't even look at it from perspective of Europe, US, and China. I think we should look at it way more from perspective humans in general, and just stood up as like, hey, are we actually okay with 8 soon-to-be trillionaires deciding the destiny for 8 billion people? No, we're not. This is not the default path that we want to. Any individual that I speak one-on-one that actually understand, nobody wants this. Nobody literally wants it. So why are we racing again? And it's so funny because they all say, yeah, we would like to stop. No, we also don't feel confident that it will go. But if we do it, then the other person will do it. So there needs to be some international coordination, like, okay, we're just stopping. But then so I've seen this in a different podcast where at that point of the stopping, they all hope that they will be slightly a bit better than the rest so that they have that power concentration. So it's really like, yeah, I have one word for it. It's insane. And it's really, I find it like, okay, how do we go about this? And to me, it's spreading this as much as I can. So there are organizations that are heavily involved in this. One of them is Center for Humane Technology, a great inspiration of mine. I follow them closely. And there's also a new documentary out. It's called The AI Doc, or How I Became an Apocalyptimist. This viewing now, so I'm organizing also viewing for us here internally, because I think these are important things to share and spread. And there in the movie, they deliberately go into this dynamic, and they actually have gotten all the big tech AI leaders also on the table to interview there. So there will be Sam Altman there, Dario Amodei, all of the bigger names. So I think that's very interesting. But yeah, so there is some type of...
Where can you watch it?
So right now it's in the theaters in America, but I think I saw you could find it via Apple. You could rent it via Apple TV. I can find the screenshot again where that was, or for which channels you can rent it. But yeah, these are the things that I feel like, hey, they're talking about a certain like human movement and how to kind of protect that. So I don't know where it will end up, but that's kind of, well, not my hope, but that's really something I feel like, hey, I also have a part of responsibility to kind of play my part in this and spread it as much as I can and talk about this with people, because these are topics. It's funny. Everybody thinks about this. Nobody really talks about this in a work environment. It's so strange. It's so weird. Especially like I work with a lot of engineers, machine learning, like they are there and they know it. They know it. And it's like a background noise in their, like, I don't know, headphones in the back of their head. And everybody knows it. But it's so funny. And I feel like, yeah, and I'm the type of person who's like, okay, this is the elephant in the room we got to address. We are professionals in this field. Yeah, in one way, we kind of depend on these larger parties. We use their technology a lot. Like we have partnerships with them. We have partnership with NVIDIA. We have partnership with Google. You know, we like, I understand like the double bind thing, but it is real and everybody acknowledges it's real. And I find it so weird. Like, how come we don't like, why isn't this like also out there? Why don't we like talk about this? Why don't we join a certain movement that is already there? Like whatever, right? So that's for me an important one to address here.
I completely agree with you. I'm now, as a founder of a tech startup, we use AI a lot. We are AI first, and it helps us a lot. Like before, we would have had to hire probably 20 developers to do the same amount of work. Now with 2, in a fraction of the time, we do better than we used to do before. So for us, it's great, but I do wonder, for us as a company, it's great. But I sometimes stop and wonder, as you were saying, in the back of my mind, is it for us as a collective, for people, is it so good? Or is it going a bit too fast? So I see the software development industry has been completely transformed in 2 years. 2 years ago, you couldn't find a developer. Now there are vacancies. There is surplus of good developers not finding a job. The pace is going to eat all of our jobs as well. Then what?
Yeah, and I think it will not necessarily eat, but it actually, because you already have that software development background, so it kind of augments you because you have this practical judgment. You have trained that. It's going to be much more harder for juniors entering the market that don't get any chance to train that. And I think so back to the question about 5 years from now, what should companies do? I think it's a wrong move to not invest in juniors, because those will be at some point your future leaders as well. Like you gotta find a way, like you expect them to figure out on their own, like give them some type of, give them the chance to get that experience, right? It's like, I think that's eventually in terms of long-term strategy, it's not the right strategy. But yeah, it is. It feels so like, yeah, we are here, in a small country, like what is our power? It's not like, but yeah, I'm an optimist, maybe a bit too much, but I do like to think like, because otherwise it's like there's no hope, and then everything is like gloom, and then why are we doing this? So that does give me feeling like, okay, the more people know it, yeah, at some point you will have like a moment of like, okay, now it is going too far, and I hope it will not be too late by then. But there are some what they call human movements, and and I think that's also the challenge, because it's exceeding the geopolitical stuff. It's exceeding the US, China, Russia story. It's higher level. It's just human. And it will ask from us to be the most mature version of ourselves. And there I'm already like, oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't have much hope for it in a way. And I make myself to have hope. Yeah.
Thanks for this. Many interesting ideas and interesting thoughts and very nice perspective. I would like to introduce one tradition that we have on the podcast, and that is called the one thing. So what is the one thing that you would like to tell the listeners in 1 minute? What is the biggest takeaway?
I would like to invite the listeners to find the courage to actually approach the parts of themselves where they're actually afraid of to touch upon or to look at. And for some, it could be this bigger dynamic that we're like, oh, that's just somewhere far away. Let's not talk about that. But for some, it could be some other difficult topic that you're shying away from. Yeah, I would like to invite the listeners to kind of, how do you call it? Like face your shadow in that way. Could be maybe framed like that. And I know it sounds weird because it is something unfamiliar and unknown, and it is something you regard maybe as negative or not so good. Let's not go in there. Oh, let's not do that. Why? This is safe, known. And even though maybe it's not very pleasant, it's more safe because I know this. The alternative of that is not necessarily better. So there is like light on the other side. So I would like to invite them to do that in any possible level that this can play out, micro and macro.
So face your demons?
Face your demons. Don't be afraid of them. They're still part of you. there's a reason they're there, like kind of face them, learn from them. Yeah. Get on the other side as a more wiser version of yourself. Yeah.
Thanks, Mariam.
Yeah. Thank you.
For where can the listeners keep in contact with you, reach out, find you, find the work that you do?
LinkedIn. I think that's the best possible way. And maybe also, so I'm also looking for some AI governance leads, change managers, transformation people, and leaders in general. So yeah, if someone is interested, also be a guest on a podcast, they would be very welcome to reach out. Yeah.
Very nice. We'll make sure to put the links on the show notes.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for this opportunity.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Take care. Bye.